Welcome to the Deep Dive. We take interesting sources, dig into them, and pull out the key insights just for you.
Yep.
Today, we're looking at the really quite extraordinary life of Abu Muhammad Rechid. He was a 19th century Tunisian general, but his origins, well, they're quite something else.
That's right. And for this, we've got some great source material, excerpts from a historical article, a published academic paper, too. Both give some, really compelling insights into Rechid and his time in Tunisia.
Okay, so our mission here is to sort of unpack the most fascinating bits of his story. We're talking kidnapping as a child, rising up the ranks in Tunisia, some really surprising connections back home, and ultimately, a pretty tragic end.
It's quite the narrative arc.
It really is. So let's start at the beginning. How does a kid from a village in Georgia end up commanding armies in North Africa? It sounds, I don't know, almost made up.
Well, the start is just so improbable, isn't it? He was born around 1802, we think, in Guria, which is near the Black Sea in Georgia. But his childhood just gets completely derailed. Kidnapped by bandits, apparently just playing in the forest.
Just like that.
Just like that. And that single event kicks off this incredible chain reaction. He's taken miles and miles away, sold into slavery.
Wow. And this life, it really shows you something about that period, doesn't it? The Ottoman world.
Oh, absolutely. It shows how fluid things could be, but also how precarious power was. A kidnapped boy rising so high, but still vulnerable.
So kidnapped, sold in Istanbul first, then shipped off to Tunis. That's just an unimaginable upheaval for a child.
Completely unimaginable. And in Tunis, his luck, if you can call it that, changes slightly. He's bought by a man named Suleiman Kaya.
Okay, who was he?
Well, interestingly, Kaya himself was a high-ranking Georgian mamluk in the Tunisian Beylik.
Ah, so a connection already. What exactly is a mamluk in this context?
Right, so mamluk basically means slave soldiers, often captured or bought from regions like the Caucasus, like Georgia. But the system, it wasn't just about servitude.
Oh.
Paradoxically, it allowed for significant social mobility. Mamluks often got really good training military administrative skills. And they could rise high, become really influential. And Kaya saw something in young Rechid.
So he didn't just buy him as labor, he saw potential.
Exactly. The sources suggest Kaya made sure Rechid was educated, taught him Arabic, reading, writing. He recognized his intelligence, his capability.
And
then Kaya eventually transferred him into the service of the ruling bey himself, put him right into the inner circle of the Tunisian ruling family. He ended up serving alongside Prince Abu Muhammad Bey.
Wow. From abducted kid to rubbing shoulders with princes.
It's an incredible climb. Just think about that path.
So being close to the bey, how did that lead to a military career specifically? Was that always the plan?
Well, it seems like Rechid himself had a real interest in military stuff. That's where his ambition met the needs of Tunisia at the time.
Okay.
His first big step was in 1837. He got appointed head of administration in Sousse. That's a key coastal city.
Administration, though, not the army straight away.
It seems like a stepping stone, yeah. Because his real focus, his passion, it was clearly the army. He got really involved in trying to reform it.
Ah, okay. And this was during the reign of Ahmed Bey.
Yes, Ahmed Bey, who ruled from 1837 to 1855. And he was very interested in military modernization. So Rechid's dedication, his talent, it made him a favorite.
And being loyal helped too, I imagine. Loyalty to the ruling Husseinid family.
Definitely. That loyalty was crucial, and Ahmed Bey rewarded it.
How so? Promotions? More responsibility?
Both. He was made commander of the Tunisian Expeditionary Forces. That's a big deal.
Expeditionary Forces. Wow.
And it didn't stop there. He became an Emir Leva in 1845. That's like a brigadier general. Then, in 1851, Emir al-Umara, divisional general.
Divisional general. So basically the top military rank.
The very highest, yeah. Second only to the Bey himself. It just shows the enormous trust and respect he'd earned by them.
It's just staggering. From that forest in Guria to the pinnacle of the Tunisian military. Okay, now, let's talk about the Crimean War. This part is fascinating. What was Tunisia's role?
Right, so you have to remember the bigger picture. Tunisia was, well, technically still part of the Ottoman Empire, even with its own back.
Okay, a dependency.
Exactly. So when the Crimean War started in 53, Russia versus the Ottomans, Tunisia sided with Istanbul, naturally.
Makes sense.
And in 1854, they sent a pretty big contingent, 12,000 soldiers, to help defend Ottoman lands near the Black Sea.
12,000, that's significant. And who led them?
Guess who? Abu Muhammad Rechid.
Of course. So where did they end up?
They were stationed initially in places like Batumi, Koboleti, Shekfatili, key coastal spots.
Right.
Later, they moved up near Sukhumi.
Well, Batumi, that's right near where he was from, isn't it?
Precisely.
Yeah.
And this is where the story takes this almost unbelievable, fateful twist. He's deployed back to the region of his birth.
Yeah, the sources mention this. Just a shocking coincidence.
It's more than shocking. It's astonishing.
Yeah.
He finds himself in the same military camp as members of the Tabgurid's family.
The family who?
Reportedly, yes.
Yeah.
The very people, or at least connected to the people, who kidnapped him all those years ago. One of them mentioned is Hussein Bey, brother of Hassan Beg Tabgirids.
Oh my goodness. Can you even imagine the psychological impact of that? Standing there seeing them.
It's almost impossible to comprehend, right? Decades later, a different life, a different uniform. And there they are.
Right. Did they interact? Do we know anything?
The records we have don't really detail any specific interactions. But just being there, in the same vicinity, it must have been incredibly tense, maybe deeply emotional for Rechid.
You'd think so. And on top of that emotional turmoil, the conditions weren't good either, were they?
Horrific. Absolutely horrific. Disease just swept through the Tunisian troops. They didn't have enough medicine, not enough warm clothing for the climate, sometimes not even enough food.
Really? That bad?
Tragically bad. More than a third of the entire contingent died, over 4,000 men, and mostly from disease and deprivation, not from fighting the Russians or Georgians.
So the environment was the bigger killer? Did they see much actual combat?
Relatively little direct fighting, it seems.
Yeah.
But there's this one detail, really interesting, from a letter Rechid himself wrote.
What did it say?
He mentioned fighting his Georgian cousins.
Wow. His Georgian cousins. So he did engage with forces from his homeland.
It certainly suggests that, yeah. Adding another layer of just sheer complexity to his whole Crimean experience.
Facing an enemy, facing your past kidnappers, potentially fighting people ethnically related to you, all while dealing with disease and shortages. That period must have been just intensely difficult for him.
Unimaginably so.
So what happened when he and the survivors finally got back to Tunisia? How were they received after such heavy losses?
You might expect negativity, but actually no. They got a warm welcome in 1856. Ahmed Bey himself greeted Rechid with honor, acknowledging his service in what was clearly a very tough campaign.
So his standing wasn't really damaged by the losses.
It seems not. He remained influential. He threw himself back into army reform and also got involved in infrastructure work, building roads, things like that.
Still dedicated to developing Tunisia then?
Very much so. He also took on diplomatic duties. And interestingly, he pioneered translating military books into Arabic in Tunisia.
Oh, really? Like technical manuals?
Yeah, we know of at least two. One on military service from Turkish in 1857 and another on army organization in 1863. So a real push to modernize the military's knowledge base.
That's quite forward thinking. And personally, did he do well out of all this?
Oh, yes. He became quite wealthy. Owned farms, commercial ships trading in the Mediterranean named El Rachidia and Sayed El Kar.
Trading ships too, he was diversifying.
Seems like it. And his position just kept growing. In 1861, he was appointed Minister of the Navy.
Minister of the Navy, that's quite the peak. From kidnapped boy to minister, but the story doesn't end there, does it? The story's talk about a fall from grace. What happened?
Yeah, things started to unravel. The big turning point seems to be 1864. There were these widespread anti-government uprisings across Tunisia.
What sparked those?
A mix of things, really. Higher taxes.
So Rechid, being maybe the most prominent mamluk, he became a symbol.
It certainly looks that way. He'd had this long, mostly successful career, especially in Susin, head of the troops in the Sahel region for 27 years. Incredibly long time.
27 years in one command.
Yeah. But his response to these 1864 uprisings, the Bey saw it as inadequate, too slow, maybe too lenient, and that led to his dismissal.
Even after all that time. It's interesting you mentioned Sousse before he was governor there briefly early on.
That's right, back in 1837 after Minister Shakir was assassinated. But it didn't last long. He apparently clashed with European merchants there.
So the military command suited him better.
It seems so. He built up a lot of influence in the Sahel over those decades. But that influence might have worked against him in 1864.
How so?
Well, the Bey might have suspected his loyalty, precisely because he was so powerful and well-connected in a region that was now rebelling. Plus, the whole system was under pressure.
So his success almost sowed the seeds of his downfall. What about his relationships with other officials?
They were complex. He was close to Mohammed Qasidar, who was a very powerful minister, but reports suggest his relations with some other military figures were, let's say, strained.
And the Europeans in Sousse, after those early clashes.
Interestingly, that relationship seems to have improved over time. Initially tense, yes, but later they seemed to respect him, even acknowledged his contributions to the region, like fixing roads, supporting archaeologists.
It really paints a picture of a complex web of power, loyalty, and resentment. Okay, so this brings us to the really grim part. His execution. How did things escalate so dramatically?
The 1860s in Tunisia were just incredibly volatile. Sadat Bey was on the throne, and he was clearly suspicious of Rechid after the 64 uprisings, especially Rechid's actions, or inaction, in the Sahel.
He thought Rechid was sympathetic to the rebels.
Or at least too lenient, yeah. Given Rechid's long history and power base there, the suspicion festered.
And there were consequences.
Big ones.
Yeah.
In August 1864, Rechid and some other top officials were actually banned from the Bey's palace. That's a huge red flag in that kind of court.
Definitely a sign he was out of favor. Dangerous.
He knew it too. He actually tried to get French citizenship, French naturalization, went through the French consular agent in Sousse, but it didn't work out.
Wow. He was actively looking for an escape route, basically.
It looks like it.
Yeah.
And then things got even worse in Tunisia. 1867 saw a terrible drought, crop failures, more hardship, more tension.
Just adding fuel to the fire.
Exactly. And into this mess steps Adel Bey, a rival claimant to the throne. He starts a rebellion against Sadat Bey.
Another rebellion.
Yes. And crucially, Adel Bey accused Rechid of being one of his supporters.
Whether it was true or not, the accusation would be devastating.
It was lethal. Sadat Bey seized on it. He ordered Rechid's immediate arrest and execution. No trial, nothing.
Just like that, based on an accusation from a rival.
Pretty much. On October 4th, 1867, soldiers went to Rechid's house. The accounts say he didn't go quietly. He apparently resisted, fought back, even wounded some soldiers.
A final act of defiance?
You could say that, but they overpowered him. He, along with another senior mamluk, was dragged before the Bey, insulted, and then hanged.
Hanged without trial, after decades of service.
It was brutal, and it caused quite an uproar. The French ambassador, other international reps in Tunis, they protested strongly, but it was done.
What a tragic, violent end to such an extraordinary life. Did he leave family? What was his lasting impact?
He did have a family. He was married to a woman named Sharifa from a prominent local family, the Zarouks. That shows how integrated he'd become into the Tunisian elite. And they had a son, Mohammed, who, interestingly, later served in the Tunisian army himself.
So let's just quickly recap. We've traced Abu Muhammad Rechid's incredible path, snatched from Georgia, rising to become this powerful general, a modernizer in Tunisia. We touched on that bizarre, almost unbelievable coincidence during the Crimean War, and then the political storms that ultimately led to his execution.
Yeah.
Digging into these sources, you really get a sense of the man and the times far beyond just a list of dates and ranks. It's much more nuanced and captivating.
Absolutely. And it leaves you thinking, doesn't it? Leaves you, the listener, with something to ponder.
Which is?
Well, consider Rechid's obvious dedication to Tunisia, his efforts at reform. How might things have gone differently if the politics hadn't been so volatile? If Sadat Bey hadn't been so suspicious?
What if?
Exactly. And what does his story tell us about power, about identity, especially in that turbulent 19th century world? How fragile it could all be. Maybe it encourages you to think about all the other unknown figures out there, people from unexpected places who quietly, or maybe not so quietly, shaped history. Their stories are out there too.